Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, we have a wrongful deportation case, a biosimilar antitrust lawsuit, and a federal probe into dramatic changes at the SEC under the Trump administration. Let's remember, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults, and read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, April 15th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln died from a gunshot wound inflicted the night before by actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. The assassination occurred at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., where Lincoln was watching a play with his wife. He was shot in the back of the head and never regained consciousness, dying the next morning at 7:22 a.m. His death was the first assassination of a U.S. president and triggered a constitutional transition of power during a critical moment in American history. Vice President Andrew Johnson was sworn in the same day, inheriting the enormous task of leading the country through the fragile early stages of Reconstruction. Legally, Lincoln's assassination set several precedents. It led to the use of military tribunals to try civilians involved in Booth's conspiracy, a decision that remains controversial in constitutional law. The event also underscored the importance of presidential succession, later clarified by the 25th Amendment. In the immediate aftermath, martial law and curfews were imposed in the Capitol, and a massive manhunt ensued for Booth and his co-conspirators. The killing intensified public sentiment against the South and complicated efforts to reunify the nation. Johnson's approach to Reconstruction diverged sharply from Lincoln's more conciliatory plans, shaping decades of legal and political conflict over civil rights. The assassination deeply impacted how the federal government approached both national security and executive protection. The tragedy marked not just the loss of a president, but a shift in the legal and political structure of post-Civil War America. As Lincoln's funeral train retraced the route that had carried him from obscurity in Illinois to the presidency, it served as a symbolic farewell to both the man and the future he might have shaped. Each stop along the way, cities draped in mourning, crowds in silent grief, marked not only the end of his political journey, but also the shunting off of a potential trajectory for his second term. Had Lincoln lived, his vision for a more lenient and reconciliatory Reconstruction might have softened the bitter divisions that would later deepen under Andrew Johnson's combative leadership. Perhaps civil rights protections would have been implemented sooner, with Lincoln using his political capital and moral authority to push for more lasting equality. The possibility remains that a different course could have been taken, one that prioritized unity without compromising justice, and that may have led to a more inclusive and less violent post-war America. Gilmar Abrego Garcia, a legally residing Salvadoran migrant in Maryland with a U.S. work permit, was wrongly deported to El Salvador in March despite a judge's order blocking his removal. The Trump administration acknowledged the deportation was an error, but has told a federal court it is not obligated to help him return from prison in El Salvador, interpreting a Supreme Court directive to facilitate his return as limited to removing domestic barriers, not assisting with his release abroad. A U.S. District Court judge had ordered the government to bring him back, a decision the Supreme Court upheld by rejecting the administration's appeal. However, a top immigration official has now argued the deportation order is moot, citing Abrego Garcia's alleged ties to MS-13, a group newly designated as a foreign terrorist organization. The State Department has confirmed that Abrego Garcia is, quote, alive and secure in a terrorism detention facility in El Salvador. Legal efforts continue, with Abrego Garcia's attorneys seeking more information from the government. The administration warns this could disrupt diplomatic talks, particularly with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele visiting Washington. President Trump has said his administration would comply if ordered directly by the Supreme Court. Sandoz, a Swiss generic drug maker, has filed a U.S. antitrust lawsuit against Amgen, accusing it of unlawfully maintaining a monopoly on its arthritis drug, Enbrel. The lawsuit, filed in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia, alleges that Amgen created a, quote, thicket of patents to block the entry of biosimilar competitors like Sandoz's Erelzi, which had been approved by the FDA since 2016 but is not launched in the U.S. Sandoz claims this strategy has kept its lower-cost alternative off the market, depriving patients of affordable options and causing the company to lose millions in potential monthly sales. Amgen has not yet commented on the lawsuit. Enbrel generated $3.3 billion in U.S. revenue in 2024 alone and is used to treat inflammatory diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis. Sandoz argues that Amgen's patent practices violate federal antitrust laws by suppressing competition and artificially extending its market dominance. The company is seeking an injunction to stop Amgen from using its patent portfolio in this way, as well as financial damages for lost sales. The U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, has agreed to investigate recent changes at the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, including those influenced by the White House and the Department of Governmental Efficiency, or DGE, led by Elon Musk. This probe follows a request from Senators Elizabeth Warren and Mark Warner, who raised concerns about the SEC's ability to fulfill its regulatory duties amid sweeping restructuring efforts. Since President Trump's return to office and the Republican takeover of the agency, the SEC has reduced staff, ended leases, and reorganized operations. It has also scaled back enforcement efforts and seen a wave of resignations as part of a broader federal downsizing initiative. The GAO confirmed that the request for an investigation falls within its authority, with the review expected to begin in about 3 months. Lawmakers stressed the importance of understanding how these changes may be undermining the SEC's mission. The agency's funding, while approved by Congress, is sourced from transaction fees rather than taxpayer dollars. These developments coincide with market instability triggered by Trump's recent tariff announcement. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment and can leave a rating or review on your podcast player, we'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will.